Hello, my name is Jonell Grace, and I want to talk to you about the practice of predatory attorneys. The statements I am making regarding probate case matters number 10-4-06186-7 Kent, Washington, and guardianship case number 11-4-03357-7 Pierce County, Tacoma, Washington. This is regarding the late Dell D. McClellan, date of death 9/14/2010. To my knowledge, is being said as factual and without malice. My intentions are to bring awareness of the practice of the corruption in probate courts, not only in my state but worldwide. The attorneys involved in my case and such cases are called predatory attorneys, better known as cave rolling attorneys. From what I personally experienced and witnessed by not only the attorneys and the guardian ad litems, GALs, involved in the illegal practices spreads from the executors, trustees, guardians, or conservators, hospitals, to pharmaceutical companies, the commissioner, judges, and said matters. Many in the legal profession are aware of what these attorneys are doing to the beneficiaries of a person's last will and testaments. The elderly and the disabled, such as the Attorney General, the Governor, the Justice Department, our state's representative and senators. Many who choose to not act upon or hold accountable or even charge these attorneys illegal, unethical, immoral practices of acquiring properties, people, and monies by any means necessary. I find I have no other recourse to get my story told other than to make it public. My hope is that others who have gone or are going through the same experience as I am will not stay silent and not to be afraid of retaliation of any type, and will come forth to also make their story public. The more that we stand up for our rights and speak up and speak out will weaken the stronghold these attorneys have. I'm exercising my right of freedom of speech. The day my world went dark was when I found my mother, Mrs. Dell McClellan, dead in her home on September 14, 2010. What was so beautiful about our story is she was not my biological mother. I have never met my biological mother. She embraced me with all the unconditional mother's love she could offer, and I embraced her as a daughter would embrace her mother. I loved her very much and am trying to honor her memory by telling my story and to keep her legacy intact, because she was a true woman of virtue, grace, and ethics. She as well as I love the Lord with all our heart. That's how we met. I needed a ride to church, and she started giving me weekly rides to our church. Our spirits bonded very quickly. We started going to special events, picnics, and friends' homes, shopping together, going out for lunch or dinner, or just for talking for hours on the phone. I so enjoyed her company, and our shared conversations were never dull. She allowed me in every aspect of her life. Her late husband, Osha McClellan, became terminally ill, and she has a son who is grown but has been diagnosed with being bipolar and schizophrenic over 20 years ago. She also had another son who had passed away years earlier. She started grooming me to look out after her son if something was to happen to her, and I gave my word I would treat him as my brother and make sure he was provided for and he'd be treated with dignity and respect. Since I met my brother, he has been in and out of psychiatric hospitals, mental health programs, various group homes, and even long-term stay at our state psychiatric hospital, Western State Hospital. My brother is an introvert, has little to no social skills. His true desire is to not live at all. He often speaks of not living and how evil he and the world is. There are times he can be very affectionate and giving, sometimes to the extent that people will prey upon him. Many times his illness will make him very withdrawn and untrusting of anyone, even his own mother, whom loved him very much. My brother and mother had a very close bond. I spent many hours and years with my brother when he was in various hospitals and group homes. He allowed me to be on his request for information list. I spoke with his case managers, nurses, doctors, and social workers many times. I worked in a psychiatric hospital in the 70s, became a CNA for 12 years. I have certificates in de-escalation training, suicide prevention, communication skills. I have HIV and AIDS training and CPR. I worked for years with youth at risk and gang members, and I am more than qualified to have looked out after my brother's needs. I have been given the gift of discernment, and I grew up in the system as a foster child. I spoke with my mother regarding her concerns on many occasions regarding her wishes to do what to do if she passed away. I was with my mother when we went to the lawyer's office to make out her first will and testament. My mother had many complicated health issues. I believe she knew she was dying in the last months of her life. She had a sense of urgency of doing things and getting her affairs in order. I know for a fact she did not get to put things in complete order before her passing. Many of her confidants can attest to this. Now comes the meat of my story. My mother left me and my brother as sole beneficiaries of her estate. I receive a third, and my brother to receive 2/3. I at no time asked my mother for anything. This was her true desire. I love her even more because she wanted me cared for after her passing. She appointed her late husband's niece as executor. Her name is Jeanette James Townsend of Rialto, California. In succession, there would be Adelia Washington and then Versailles Washington, both of Rialto, California. Within the first 3 days of my mother's passing, things started going suspicious and wrong. I knew it would never be the same. Stealing of her property. Jeanette and her Aunt Versailles went through my mother's home without me being there, and against my protest, her aunt to stay in my mother's home alone for 3 days by herself. Both were seen by neighbors taking suitcases they did not come with. Jeanette admitted in front of me and my best friend that her aunt was known throughout the family to take things after a family member died. Jeanette stated to me she took a suitcase to put papers in. I started discovering items missing after I came from my mother's funeral in Texas. Items such as my mother's wedding and engagement rings, an extensive antique car collection, a mink coat, several expensive pin jewelry, etc. I immediately confronted Jeanette by phone and by email regarding said matters. I spoke of matters to Jeanette on the sister listening to conversations. Versailles returned some of junk jewelry that wouldn't amount to $30 with a very bitter letter. My mother was picked dry before she was in a casket. I was instructed by Jeanette to get rid of everything in my mother's home immediately. I was told this in front of my friend, Minister Kinchin, to call the Goodwill or Salvation Army, or else she would rent a dumpster and take my mother's belongings to the dump. She allowed her Aunt Versailles to have a set of keys to my mother's home. My mother hired the law firm of Johnson and Nagayach, Federal Way, Washington, to draw up her will and to be her estate planner. Andrea Lee handled the case after my mother passed. I reported to Rajiv Nagayach, part owner, and Andrea Lee what was happening with Jeanette and Versailles. I was told by Rajiv that Jeanette's actions or lack of actions were grounds for dismissal as executor and trustee. Jeanette and Versailles have never been held accountable for their actions. Jeanette did nothing for the estate except to run up a very expensive tab. She rented a Cadillac Escalade, stayed in hotels. She took unnecessary trips here to Washington State and an extended stay in Texas to visit her sister and charged it to the estate. She paid one utility bill, and utilities got shut off. She did not do her fiduciary duties as executor. She did not make or file an accounting or an inventory in a timely manner. She and her cousin Adalia flew up here to Seattle and broke into my mother's home with Andrea's knowledge, but not informing me or my brother. They said they hired a locksmith but cannot produce an invoice. I had changed the locks for fear of any of the McKellen family to return and take more items. When I spoke with Rajiv and Andrea, I was told so many various stories of how probate works, I could never make any headway. They sent the will to my brother in the hospital, but I never got copies of anything. All I got was a constant runaround and conflicting stories of how things work. I was told that Jeanette was could do pretty much whatever she wanted with no repercussions. I was told that the law firm represented Jeanette and Rajiv told me in front of Minister Kitchen that if I was to get an attorney for me and my brother, I would be making the other attorneys rich. That was the only statement made to be true thus far. He told me he was not going to start billing the estate until December 1st, 2010, out of respect for what he had for my mother. I found myself in a whirlwind of tales, lies, and confusion. It became clear I wasn't going to get the truth from the executor or the lawyer, so I was forced to hire a lawyer to protect me and my brother's interests.